It's the International Soccer Preview, and we are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 28, looking at the groups and teams of the 2024 Copa America. This episode is looking at the players of Venezuela. Here we go! Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin, and this is Series 28 on the players of the 2024 Copa America. This episode covers Venezuela's players. We're doing this mediacast in two parts. Part one here is a look at the candidates for the squad and their likelihood of making it. We examined the participation of players in games over the recent period, as well as a couple of other factors, and categorized them into definite, likely, possible, and so on. Part two will come out when the squad lists are released and the final squad selected. At that time, we'll go back over the list that we create here and see who made it and who didn't. And we'll also cover things like injuries and surprise selections. So this episode has three sections. In section one, we looked at some general information on the team. Section two, we cover the main candidates in each position and their likelihood of making the squad. And in section three, we summarize and conclude. Let's begin then, jumping into section one and some comments on the squad. Here, we don't really have any retirements. I'm just going to mention Fernando Aristeguieta, not really a veteran. He only has 29 caps, but he was captain of the team in the absence of Thomas Rincon for the 2021 Copa America. And he's only 32 years old, so he maybe has a couple of years to come back. No, I'm actually seeing that he's retired from soccer altogether, so probably not going to come back. Last appeared in June 2022. He was a forward and played in the 2019 and 2021 Copa Americas. Otherwise, no big names retiring for Venezuela. And yeah, since the 2021 Copa America there. Let's take a quick look at club affiliations here. And we'll maybe just look at some of the key players. Most of them do play outside, at least the first team players play outside of Venezuela. That could be in Europe, or it could be for some of the bigger leagues in South America, like Brazil and Argentina or Mexico, which is not in South America, but there we have it. We have Jordan Osorio playing for Parma in Italy. One of their younger players is with Real Sociedad in Spain. That's John Aramburu. So maybe he will develop into one of their leading players. Speaking of leading players, we have Thomas Rincon. He's playing for Santos in Brazil, 133 caps for the captain. And Darwin Matches playing for Cadiz in Spain. So those kind of clubs, kind of secondary clubs, no real top clubs there. We have also players playing in the USA, and Salomon Rondon, the other veteran here, playing for Pachuca in Mexico, but he did play in Europe. Okay, that's a quick look at the squad there and all the squad affiliations, and let's move on to talk about recent games. So we're going to look at they played 13 games since the start of 2023. That's where we're looking. One of those games, though, was played in December of 2023, and really they put out a squad with very few familiar names on it. Perhaps it was even less than a B-team squad. Perhaps it was more of a youth squad. I'm not sure, but we're not going to include that one kind of in the count here. So we'll be talking about the participation of players in 12 games, because none of the regulars participated in that game. In terms of their participation in tournaments, Venezuela has not made a World Cup. but always made the Copa America because that's automatic participation. So when we look back at tournaments for the players, we'll really go back to maybe the 2029 Copa America to look at their participation in that one and in the 2021 version, where they were ravaged with COVID, Venezuela more than other teams. So even that maybe not a true account of players' participation. Anyway, that's all we have in terms of tournaments. Let's look at their formations over the past while. So basically we have about a third of the time we have them using a 4-4-2 formation. That is 4 of their 13 games. We should have X'd out the December game there. But anyway, about a third of the time, 4-4-2, and another third of the time a 4-3-3 formation. And then they have they've used 4 other formations, none of them more than twice. Also about a third of the time, a little more, 5 of the 13 games. So the midfield changes around quite a lot there, but the defense does not. It's almost always a 4-man backline there with 2 central defenders, a left back and a right back. Only once did they use a 3-man backline. That was in the second last game they played, or the first of the March friendlies. And on that note, I'll say that the first 4 games of this period were friendlies in March and June 2023. Then they had 6 games of World Cup qualifying for the 2026 World Cup. And then they had 3 friendlies, but we're discounting the one in December 2023. So we'll say 2 friendlies in March 2024. And in general, they did experiment quite a bit in the friendlies and not so much in the World Cup qualifiers. So the team we expect to see at the Cup will be fairly similar to that which we see in the World Cup qualifying matches. Let's move on to our last order of business in this section, and that is upcoming games. And surprisingly, Venezuela has scheduled no warm-up matches for this tournament. We see most teams playing a game or 2 in USA, or 3, but Venezuela, I was going to say so far have no warm-up matches scheduled, but it would be pretty much too late to organize one now. So we won't get kind of a look at the team in terms of warm-up matches, and we'll just have to see who they start with in the Cup. Okay, let's move on to section 2 and a look at the players, and we begin with the manager. We'll put a couple of names out here. Jose Pizarro, that's a previous manager. Jose Perkman, also there, and Fernando Batista. So Fernando Batista is our current manager, so we'll give a little information about him. Unlike Pizarro and Perkman, who have experience managing at least 2 other national teams, Batista was an assistant manager for Venezuela, who moved into the position when Perkman was dismissed from the squad. So he's been manager of Venezuela since 2023. He was the assistant manager under Perkman from 2021 to 2023, and otherwise has just managed youth teams, the under 23 and under 20 teams for Argentina, and the under 18 and under 19 teams for the unlikely Armenia. So not a lot of experience there. Batista was a player in Argentina from 1990 to 2001, but he didn't earn any international caps. So fairly inexperienced to Fernando Batista. I'll just go over the history and put these names into context. So Jose Pizarro was their manager for the 2021 Copa America. So we're starting with the previous tournament there. As I said before, they were plagued with COVID problems during that tournament, even more so than other teams. He was actually praised for how he managed through all of those problems, but he resigned in August of that year, apparently or reportedly not paid in over a year because of an economic crisis in Venezuela. So I don't know how they afforded Jose Perkerman, but he came in afterwards. Also, as I said, an experienced international manager, having managed Argentina and Colombia beforehand, and he took them through World Cup 2022 qualifying, but actually was dismissed in March 2023 when they finished bottom of the 10 team group in South America. And the relatively inexperienced assistant manager, Fernando Batista, stepped into the position in March of 2023. So he will have taken them through the period we're looking at. He's making the decisions on the selections, and we'll talk about that more at the end, about the decisions that he has been making. Okay, let's look at the positions then. So for goalkeepers, we have no definite candidate, but we have two likely candidates. The first, Rafael Romo, and the second, Joel Gratterall. Sorry, we have three likely candidates. The third one is Alain Baroja. We also have one possible candidate in Jose Contreras, and then one player who we'll put him in the retired section because he's been off the squad since June 2022, and that is Walker Farnes. Yeah, it's a veteran with the team, part of all the tournaments since 2015, and the starter in 2019. Walker Farnes, now not retired from soccer, but retired from the national team, it seems. Let's go back and look at the more likely candidates for this tournament then, beginning with Rafael Romo. He's 34 years old and has 21 caps for the national team since all the way back to 2008. He was not part of any squads until the 2019 Copa America, and there he was a backup keeper on the bench. But for the Copa America 2021, he was selected for the final squad, but tested positive for COVID, so couldn't play in the tournament. He returned in June 2023 after a 15-month absence, did Rafael Romo, and he started 8 of their 10 games, and he was on the bench for the first of those and then not selected for the last match. So, yeah, probably the most likely candidate here. But we couldn't put him in the definite, especially because of missing the last match. So Rafael Romo, a likely candidate. Next, we have Joel Gratterall. He's 27 years old, and he has 12 caps for Venezuela since 2019. And he plays for America de Cali in Colombia. He has played in Europe for a team in Greece, and he was on the squad for the Copa America 2019 as a backup keeper, and he was the starter in Copa America 2021. However, he lost his starting position there and was replaced by Walker Farnes in that tournament. In the recent period, Gratterall has started 3, including the last 12, including the last one, the last game. 3 of their games, and he was on the bench for 8. So just one match that he wasn't selected for. So Joel Gratterall, also a likely candidate. And I did forget to mention Rafael Romo's club history, so I'll just jump back to that. He's currently playing for Universidad Católica in Chile since 2023, but he has also been with teams in the USA and Europe, fairly minor teams there. Except for Udinese in Italy, where he was from 2009 to 2016. That's Rafael Romo. Okay, so let's move on and look at our third likely candidate, Alain Baroja. He's 34 years old, just like Romo. a little bit older, and he has 15 caps for the national team since 2015. And he's currently playing for Bolivian team Always Ready since 2024, but was with Caracas in Venezuela for a long time before that, for 14 years. Was with Caracas. He was a starter in the Copa America 2015. But hasn't been selected for any tournament since. So the 3 tournaments since then, he hasn't participated in. In the recent period, he started one of their 12 games and was on the bench for 10. So he is almost always selected there. So those are the 3 likely candidates. The possible candidate is Jose Contreras. He's 30 years old and has just 6 caps since 2016. He plays for Aguilas Dorados in Colombia since 2022. He's also played in Costa Rica there, and he was on the squad for the 2016 Copa America Centenario, on the bench there, but that's his only tournament. So a bit like Baroja there, just one tournament a while ago and not selected for recent tournaments. Contreras, he did make the preliminary squad for the Copa America 2021, but otherwise has been absent from the team for 6.5 years. And returned in March 2024 and was on the bench for both of those friendlies in March 2024. So Contreras making perhaps a late comeback to the team. Okay, those are our candidates. Let's look at the situation in summary. It was Baroja who started the first game of 2023, and then Graterol started the next 2. Those were 3 friendlies. Romo then returned from an absence and took over from the starting position, including all 6 of their World Cup qualification games. But in the March 2024 friendly, in the last game, Graterol came back to start that one. So it does look like Romo as the starter here, but a bit of a challenge from Graterol. Okay, let's move on to the defense and look at central defenders. And we have a definite candidate in Jordan Osorio. And 2 likely candidates in Wilker Angel and Christian Macoun. Possible candidate Nahuel Ferrarese there, and we have possible but unlikely John Chancellor, a fairly familiar name for Venezuela, and then we have several candidates who are off the squad. I'm only going to name them and give details on a couple of them. The first one is Luis Mago. He actually did start 2 games during this period, neither as a central defender, actually, and he was part of the squads for the 2019 and 2021 Copa Americas, actually starter in both of those, but has not appeared for the last 7 matches. Luis Mago, so he seems to be off the squad. The other one is Mikel Villanueva, and he also was part of the last 2 cups. In fact, the last 3 cups, he was selected for the final squad. However, he last appeared for the national team in September 2022, so he is off the squad. But both are actually possible of a comeback. The other ones are just young players who popped their head in the door and really haven't made any impact. It's Carlos Vivas and Joshua Mejias. So we might see those in the future. They're both quite young, but neither of them getting enough participation here to be considered candidates. Let's go back to the ones who are considered candidates. Jordan Osorio, is a definite candidate. He's 30 years old, 29 caps and no goals since 2017, and he plays for Parma in Italy since 2020, was with Porto in Portugal before that, and loaned to Zenit St. Petersburg. So some good clubs on his resume there. He was selected for the 2019 Copa America, just a substitute there, but only for the preliminary squad in 2021 and didn't make the final cut, Jordan Osorio. However, over the recent period, he's become a starter, starting 11 of their 12 games and on the bench for the others. So he's a definite candidate for this competition and probably a starter there. The first of our two possible or likely candidates is Wilker Angel. He's 31 years old with 38 caps and 2 goals for the national team since 2014, and he plays for Criciúma in Brazil. Since 2024. He's played in Ecuador, Turkey, and Russia, so has traveled quite a bit there. Wilker Angel was part of the 2015 and 2016 Copa America squads, but not selected for the last two in 2019 and 2021, just the preliminary squad in 2021 there. But he returned after a 2-year absence, much of which he was injured for, actually. Returned in June 2023 and started 8 of their remaining 10 games. He was on the bench for one, injured for the last match in March, but he has recovered from that. So Wilker Angel making a big comeback to the team here, and he's a likely candidate. Next, we have Christian Makoun. He's 24 years old with 10 caps since 2022. He plays for Anorthosis Famagusta in Cyprus since 2024. He was with a couple of American teams prior to that. Bigger American teams, New England Revolution and Inter Miami. Christian Makoun got his first appearance on the bench in October of back in 2021, but didn't get his first cap until 2022. He started 2 of their 12 games over the recent period, subbed in for 2 and was on the bench for 6. And the only 2 matches that he missed were due to injury, which he's recovered from. So Christian Makoun, a likely candidate, not necessarily a starter, but likely to be called up. Next, we have Nahuel Ferrarizi. I don't know why I couldn't say that name properly when I introduced him. Anyway, Nahuel Ferrarizi is 25 years old and has 25 caps and 1 goal for Venezuela since 2018. Currently with Sao Paulo in Brazil since 2024, but with Manchester City in England, a very big club, from 2021 to 23. He didn't play any games for them, but he was loaned out, including to Sao Paulo, who he eventually joined. He's also played in Uruguay, Portugal, and Spain, Nahuel Ferrarizi. And in terms of competitions, only the preliminary squad for the 2019 Copa America, but was selected for the 2021 edition, appearing just as a substitute there. Actually, he did start game 4 there, but otherwise didn't appear. Ferrarizi returned after a long injury absence in October of 2023, and he started the last 2 of their remaining 6 games. And he was also subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 3. So once he returned from injury, he was called up consistently. So maybe a bit of a better prospect than the possible level that we put him at there. But we'll have to see. So Nahuel Ferrarizi. John Chancellor, a bit of I wouldn't say a veteran, but a very experienced player for Venezuela and part of the Copa America in 2019 and 2021. However, he was tested positive for COVID after being selected for the final squad, so couldn't play in that tournament. Um, yes, okay. I was just looking because he was considered part of the squad there because he was replaced after game one in 2021. John Chancellor, though, has drifted off the team. He started 3 of their 12 games since the start of 2023, and he was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 1, but he hasn't been selected for the last 6 matches, which is why we have him as possible but unlikely. But I would put it as possible since he is a fairly big name for them. But anyway, we'll leave it at that and introduce him if he is selected for the final squad. Let's talk about the position. So, as we said in section 1, Venezuela almost always uses a 4-man back line. So we're looking for 2 central defenders here. Only once in their second last game did they use a 3-man back line. And the main pairing for them is the definite candidate Jordan Osorio and the likely candidate Angel Wilker. However, in the first 4 games, it was a bit messy. It was one of those 2 alongside a different player each time, all of whom are now off the team. But at the start of World Cup qualifying, it did settle into the pairing of Osorio and Angel. They played 5 of the 6 games together, and our other likely candidate, Macoun, replaced Osorio in 1 of those 6 games. In the March friendlies, we saw Ferrarese join those 2. He joined Osorio and Angel in the game with the 3-man back line, and then in the last game he replaced Angel. We don't really see that as a challenge to Angel's position, but we do see Ferrarese as perhaps the challenging Macoun kind of for the top substitute position, as it were. But Macoun and Ferrarese are the backups here, and really just 4 candidates that they're going with here. So teams usually bring 5 or 6, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Chancellor or even Luis Mago brought back into the squad here. Okay, let's move on to the left back position, and we'll talk about the position briefly. The position left back and right back really is a defensive position, except in the one game where they used a 3-man back line. In that case, the position moved up to a winger position, both on the left and on the right. However, it was one of the players coded here who filled the position rather than an attacking midfielder coming in and playing it. So let's look at our left backs here. We have a definite candidate in Miguel Navarro. And we jump down to just a possible level candidate, Roberto Rosales. And we have a possible but unlikely candidate in Rene Rivas, who we won't talk about, an inexperienced player there. Though we'll talk about him if he comes into the squad in the final selection. We have 2 players seemingly off the squad. The first one is Johan Kumana. He was a starter in the 2021 Copa America, but hasn't been on the team since March 2023. And same is true with Oscar Gonzalez in terms of not being with the team since March 2023. So we'll just leave those as names. Gonzalez has no tournament experience for Venezuela. Okay, let's look at Miguel Navarro. He is 25 years old with 11 caps and no goals. Joined the team quite late in 2022 and plays for Colorado Rapids in the USA since 2024, but is currently on loan to Talleres in Argentina. He also played for Chicago Fire in USA there. He has no tournament experience then, and he did appear on the bench in October 2020, so I guess was on the radar for the 2021 Copa America, but he was off the team after that and didn't return until 2022. In the recent period, Navarro has started 8 of their 12 games and he was on the bench for one, injured for two, just one match that he wasn't called up for. So Miguel Navarro, a definite candidate to make the squad. Roberto Rosales has far more experience, but is just a possible candidate here. He's 35 years old with 95 caps and one goal since 2007 for Venezuela. He's currently playing for Sport Recife in Brazil since 2023, but has played quite a bit in Europe, in Cyprus and in Spain, especially for Malaga in Spain, where he was for 5 years. And he's been part of every tournament since the 2011 Copa America, Roberto Rosales. And we won't go into detail on that, but he was a starter in most of them. In 2021, though, just one appearance in Game 4 there. And after that, he was off the team for a year until he returned in June of 2023 and started just one game, actually not as a left back, but as a right midfielder. So he also was subbed in for two and on the bench for three, and not selected for the last two matches. So just a possible candidate, the veteran now, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him just brought for his experience. So really only two viable candidates there. And let's talk about the position of left back. And Navarro is the mainstay, but he did only start 8 of the 12 games. He was injured for the June 2023 friendlies, and in that case, it was central defender John Chancellor replacing him. We're going to see actually it's usually central defenders as the backups for these positions. So we would have expected to see Rosales replace him, but he didn't. Navarro didn't fully return until halfway through the World Cup qualifiers. He was replaced not by Rosales, but by players in single appearances for the two other games that he missed. So Navarro is the starter, but there doesn't seem any clear backup here because Rosales has never stepped in to replace him. So the backup seems to be just one of the central defenders. Okay, let's go to the right back position. And here we have a definite candidate in Alexander Gonzalez. And also no likely candidate, but one possible candidate in John Aramburu. And we only have one player who is seemingly off the squad here. That is Ronald Hernandez. He was a sub in both of the previous Copa Americas. So selected for the squad, but not a starter. And he last appeared for Venezuela in March of 2023. So off the team for more than a year now. Okay, let's look at Alexander Gonzalez. He's 31 years old with 66 caps and 2 goals since 2011. And he plays for Emelec in Ecuador since 2024. But he has also experience playing in Armenia, Spain, and Romania, as well as Switzerland. So quite experienced there. And experienced in tournaments too. His first tournament was the 2011 Copa America, Alexander Gonzalez, and shockingly not selected for the 2015 Copa America, but was selected for all tournaments since. No, he wasn't selected for the 2019 Copa America either, just making the preliminary squad there as well as in 2015. He was a starter in the 2021 Copa America, Alexander Gonzalez, and has been a starter in the recent period. He did return after a 13-month absence, or just before the beginning of this period, in November 2022. But during the period, started 9 of their 12 games, subbing in for 1 and not selected for 2 matches. So Alexander Gonzalez, a definite candidate here. The possible candidate is John Aramburu. And He is 22 years old and just has 3 caps for the national team since 2023. So just joining the squad. But he's playing for Real Sociedad in Spain, a good club affiliation, but kind of halfway between their B team and A team since 2023. And he got his first appearance in June of 2023 for the national team. He started 2 of their remaining 10 games and subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 3, but not selected for 4 matches. So John Aramburu is just a possible candidate here. And he only has 2 starts, as I said. One of them was as a central defender. The other was as the right winger in the one game where they used a 3-man back line. And that leads us nicely into the summary of the position. So, like Navarro on the left side, Gonzalez is the mainstay on the right, but he too missed some games. He, like Navarro, missed the June friendlies and was replaced by central defenders, 2 different ones. He also, as we say, missed the game with the 3-man backline, Aramburu playing as the right winger in that game. So Alexander Gonzalez looking like the starter here. And Aramburu does look like a backup. More so than Rosales on the left side here, but it's still central defenders kind of replacing him some of the time. Okay, on we go to the midfield, and we have defensive midfielders to look at. We have a likely candidate in Jose Andres Martinez, and a possible candidate in Junior Moreno, and a possible but unlikely Jesus Bueno. And then we have just 2 names I'll put out there, kind of new to the squad, but they've been in and about, but seem to be off the squad at the moment. That is the Christian La Rotonda and Teo Quintero. Both of them are young enough that we might see them in the future. Let's go back to Jose Andre Martinez. He's 29 years old and has 28 caps. And no goals for the national team since 2021. He plays for Philadelphia Union in the USA since 2020 and has been or was a starter in the Copa America 2021. There, he was actually quite good down the right side in that tournament. He has started 8 of their 12 games since the start of 2023. On the bench for 2, just 2 matches that he wasn't selected for. So Jose Martinez, a likely candidate here. Junior Moreno, the possible candidate, is 30 years old. He has 40 caps and 1 goal since 2017, and recently moved to Saudi Arabia, having played with the USA, for several teams. Over 2 teams in the USA from 2018 to 23. He was a starter in the 2019 Copa America, Junior Moreno, and also in the 2021 Copa America. However, over the recent period, Moreno has only started 2 of their 12 games. He was subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 3. Not selected for 4 matches, including the last 2. So we can only put Moreno as a possible candidate here. And yeah, we won't talk about the other 3 candidates. Jesus Bueno, possible but unlikely, but we'll talk about him if he's selected. Before we talk about the position in general, let's look at the central midfielders, and here we have the captain of the team, Thomas Rincon, as a definite candidate, and Yangel Herrera as a likely candidate, as well as Christian Cáceres, also a likely candidate. Daniel Pereira is a possible candidate, and then we have two players who are possible but unlikely. Edson Castillo was selected for the 2021 Copa America, But oh, actually, maybe we should make him a possible candidate because he came back in November 2023. Didn't start any games, but he was subbed in for three and on the bench for another. So I'm going to bump him up to a possible candidate here. He was a sub in the Copa America in 2021 as well. The other one, though, we will leave at the possible but unlikely level, Talasco Segovia. Possible but unlikely. Not selected for 8 of the 12 matches during this period, although he was on the bench for the last 2 matches, so maybe a bit more than uh, we have him. Anyway, we'll leave him where he is. And we have one player retired, it seems, Wampi Anor. The veteran of several tournaments, 2016 and 2019 Copa America, but last played for the team in November 2022. So Wampi Anor seems to be retired from the national team here. Well, yeah, and when we say retired, we really mean either they're officially retired or they've just been off the team for a significant period. But let's go back and look at our main candidates here. Thomas Rincon is the captain. He's 36 years old. He has 132 caps, but just one goal since 2008. And we said in section one, he plays for Santos in Brazil since 2023, but he's played for several teams in Italy and a couple of teams in Germany as well. Torino in Italy and Juventus also, although I don't think he played any games for Juventus because he was loaned out. Anyway, Thomas Rincon, his first tournament was the Copa America in 2011. Where he was a starter, and he has been part of every tournament since, except for the 2021 Copa America, where he was selected for the final squad and another player tested positive for COVID. So, as we say, they were really ravaged during that tournament. Over the recent period, Rincon has only started 5 of their 12 games, but he has also subbed in for 5 and on the bench for 1. Just one match that he wasn't selected for. And given that he's the captain, we think he'll be a definite candidate here. Yangel Herrera is the first of the likely candidates. He's 26 years old with 34 caps and 3 goals since 2016. And he's with Girona in Spain now, but he was with Manchester City in England from 2017 to 23, so 6 years with them, but loaned out for most of that time and didn't play any games for Manchester City. His first tournament was the 2016 Copa America Centenario, and he's been part of the 2019 and 2021 versions. Only a starter, though, in the 2019 version. He returned, though, after a year-long injury absence in June 2023 and started 7 of their remaining 10 games. And he was injured for the last 2 matches, but he has recovered from injury. So we do see Yangel Herrera as a starter here and a likely candidate, probably more than likely. The other likely candidate is Christian Cáceres. He's 24 years old and has 28 caps and no goals since 2020. And he plays for Toulouse in France since 2023 and was with New York Red Bulls in USA for 5 years before that. His first tournament was the 2021 Copa America. He was a starter for all 4 games in that tournament, but recently has only started 3 of their 12 games, Christian Cáceres, and he was subbed in for 6 and on the bench for 2. So only 1 game he wasn't called up for. That's why we have him as a likely candidate, but doesn't seem to be a starter as he was in the 2021 Copa America. He might have gotten starts in that tournament because of other players being out. Our first possible candidate is Daniel Pereira. He's 24 years old and just has 4 caps for the national team since 2023. And he plays for Austin FC in the USA. He got his first appearance in June of 2023, started 2 of their remaining 10 games, as well as subbing in for 2, but he wasn't selected for 6 matches. So kind of on the fringes of the squad, Daniel Pereira. I guess also on the fringe of the squad is Edson Castillo. He's 30 years old, but only has 9 caps for the national team, 1 goal there, and has been with Venezuela since 2021, so joined the team quite late. He interestingly plays for Kaizer Chiefs in South Africa since 2023, and otherwise has played mostly in Venezuela, but seems to go for interesting countries. He's been with Mexico, a team in Mexico, and in Azerbaijan, Neftchi Baku in Azerbaijan. So interesting club connections there. He was selected for the 2021 Copa America. He subbed into the first 2 games and then got a starting position there. But in recent times, he was actually off the team for 19 months. Almost 2 years there, returning in November 2023. And didn't start any of their remaining 4 games, but he was subbed in for 3 and on the bench for the others. So Edson Castillo making a recent bid to get back into the squad here. And he's the last of our possible candidates, so we can go way back to the beginning of midfielders and talk about the position and then the players. So it's actually quite complex. Most of Venezuela's have various formations make it a bit complex. Most of their formations have 2 or even 3 players in this position, be they defensive or central midfielders. If we recall that their favoured formations are the 4-3-3 and the 4-4-2 formation, it's just 1 line of midfielders in those formations. But they also experimented with formations that have 2 lines, like a 4-1-4-1 formation or a 4-2-3-1. So we're kind of simplifying things here when we talk about the position. And really, we don't see much of a pattern in the selections. Jose Andre Martinez and Herrera, Yangel Herrera, were the 2 players most used, but they only started 8 and 7 games respectively. Meanwhile, Captain Thomas Rincon started less than half, only 5 of the games. So we're seeing quite a few players come and go here. But we can look to the World Cup games for some stability. It was mostly those 3 rotating in the position, Martinez, Herrera, and Rincon. And only in 1 game did all 3 of them play together. In the friendlies at the beginning and at the end of the period we're looking at, a lot of players came in and out, and mostly for only 1 appearance. So we'll just mention 2 players who appeared more than once. Each of Cáceres and Daniel Pereira got 3 starts during this period. So we'll kind of look at those players as the backup. But it's quite complex situation there. Okay, let's move on upfield. And even though they do use a 4-3-3 formation that has a left and right midfielder, we didn't see any particular pattern there, so we didn't discuss them separately. We do have actually 2 players coded as right midfielder, but Jefferson Soteldo, we're going to move to the left attacking position, which we'll do right away here, and Romulo Otero will move to the central attacking midfield position. So on we go up to the left attacking midfield position. And just a summary of these positions, we kind of created this category ourselves because we noticed it's often the same player, whether the position is a left winger, left attacking midfielder, or left forward. Depending on the formation the team uses. And that's the case here with Venezuela, and the same is true on the right side. So, for instance, the two formations they favor, the 4-4-2, will have a winger for this left attacking position, and the 4-3-3 will have a left forward for this position. But again, tends to be the same player. Let's look at the candidates then. We have Jefferson Soteldo, coded as a right midfielder, but actually has been playing here on the left side, and he's a likely candidate. We have Darwin Matches, also as a likely candidate. Samuel Sosa is a possible candidate, and John Murillo, also a possible candidate. Possible but unlikely, Enrique Pena Zoner, and seemingly off the squad, Freddy Vargas. We'll just drop his name there and won't talk about him. Here, last appeared in March 2023. So let's go to the candidates that are likely to make the squad. Jefferson Soteldo is 26 years old, and he has 38 caps and 4 goals for the national team since 2016, and plays for Santos in Brazil. It's actually his second stint with them, but he is on loan to Grêmio in Brazil since 2024. He's also played in Mexico and in Canada. Canada here, Toronto, though, the other side of Canada from where I'm at, and in Chile as well, so quite well travelled is Jefferson Soteldo. And he was on the preliminary squad for the 2016 Copa America Centenario, but didn't make the final cut. But he did make the squads in 2019 and 2021. Basically as a substitute in those tournaments. Soteldo started 6 of their 12 games over the recent period. He subbed in for 2, and he was injured for the last 2, but he has recovered from that injury. Also not selected for 2 matches. So Jefferson Soteldo, a likely candidate. Darwin Matches is 31 years old. He has 45 caps and 11 goals for Venezuela since 2011, and plays for Real Valladolid in Spain, but actually is on loan to Cadiz in Spain. He's played for a few clubs in Spain and in Italy, and also in Mexico. Darwin Matches, and even though he joined the team in 2011, it took until 2019 to appear in a tournament, and he did just for the Copa America 2019, where he subbed into game 1 and gained a starting position. However, for the Copa America in 2021, he made the preliminary squad, but not the final squad, Darwin Matches. So tournament-wise, kind of on the edge of selection. For this tournament, he started 6 of their 12 games over the recent period, subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2. And the only 2 matches he missed were the first 2 where he was injured. So this looks like a good opportunity for him to actually make the squad. Darwin Matches, we consider him likely. Samuel Sosa is 24 years old, and he has 7 caps for the national team since 2019, and he plays for Talleres in Argentina, but actually is on loan to Querétaro in Mexico since 2024. He's been loaned out actually quite a bit by Talleres. He was on the preliminary squad back for the 2019 Copa America, but didn't make the final cut there, and not even on the 49 player preliminary squad for the 2021 Copa America. So that's quite far from reaching the squad. And His first appearance was way back in June of 2019, but then he was off the team for more than 3.5 years. But he returned at the beginning of this period in March of 2023 and started 5 of their remaining 12 games. And but there were 4 matches that he wasn't selected for, including the last 2 matches. So we have Samuel Sosa as a possible candidate here. John Murillo is 28 years old. He's also a possible candidate. He has 41 caps and 3 goals for Venezuela since 2015. And he's currently playing in Mexico on loan to Atlas in Mexico. He's also played for Benfica in Portugal, as well as Kaltenpasa in Turkey. He was loaned to them. John Murillo was selected for the 2015 Copa America, but not the 2016, just the preliminary squad for that one. And he was a starter then in 2019 Copa America. And another player who was selected for the final squad in 2021, but then tested positive for COVID and had to be replaced. Over the recent period, though, he's not started any of their games, John Murillo. He just subbed in for 2. That was the first match and the last match. Otherwise, he was on the bench for 4 matches, but not selected for 6. So John Murillo kind of on the edge of making the squad, it seems. But we have him as a possible candidate. Our possible but unlikely candidate, Henrique Peñazano, was born in Germany, so he plays in Europe. He made his first appearance really recently in March of 2024, but didn't start either of the 2 games. And in fact, he was subbed in for the first and then not selected for the second. So we have him as an unlikely candidate here. Okay, those are our right midfielders. What am I talking about? Our left attackers. So let's summarize the position. And really here, we see a rotation of Soteldo, Matches, and Sosa. Soteldo has the most starts, with 6 of them, including 4 of the 6 World Cup games. However, Matches did start the last 2 friendlies in March of 2024, so has kind of a recent claim on the position. Matches actually also has 6 starts, but he has started in other positions as well as left attacker here. The same is true for Sosa, who has only 2 starts in this position, but has started in other positions as well. So Soteldo kind of the top candidate, but really it's a rotation among the 3 of them so far, or over the recent period. Over to right attackers, we only have 1 candidate here at the likely level, and that's Jefferson Savarino. So let's take a look at him. Savarino is 27 years old, and he has 38 caps and 3 goals since 2017, and plays for Botafogo in Brazil since 2024. He was with Real Salt Lake in the USA before that, his second stint with them, actually. Savarino was selected for the 2019 Copa America, a starter in a couple of the games there, but just a substitute in the 2021 Copa America. Over the recent period, Savarino has started 6 of their 12 games since the start of 2023, subbing in for 2 and on the bench for 2. Just 2 games that he wasn't selected for. So we have Savarino as a likely candidate. You may be wondering then, who is starting in this position? The right attacking position is even more unsettled than on the left. Savarino is the top candidate, but he did only start half of the games, as we saw. So here we see the left attackers, Sosa and Darwin Matches coming over to start in this role. And then we also have several players with single starts especially in the friendlies. So we're seeing kind of a theme here under the new manager. That the top candidates' positions have only started half. I'm going to save that for the closing discussion, actually. And I'm just going to move on to central attackers here. Okay, let's take a look here. We just have two candidates at the possible level. One of them is Edward Bello, and the other is Romelu Otero, actually coded as a right midfielder, but we moved him here since his only start was in this position. Edward Bello, on the other hand, has started three times and all in three different positions, none of them in this position. Anyway, let's take a look. I got to finish introducing the candidates because we have a possible but unlikely candidating Irvin Andrade and a seemingly off the squad David Martinez. We won't talk about them unless they make the final squad. Let's go back to Edward Bello. None of these candidates are used very much. He's 29 years old with 14 caps and 2 goals since 2018. And he plays in Mazatlan in Mexico since 2022. So not selected for even for any of the Copa Americas in 2019 or 2021. And in fact was off the team for 3 years. For a 3-year period since 2018. He started in this period, started 3 of their 12 games, subbed in for 1 and was on the bench for 4. However, Bello was not selected for 4 games, including the last 2 matches. As we said, just kind of filling in gaps. Edward Bello, his 3 starts in 3 different positions. So a possible candidate. The other possible candidate is Romelu Otero, and he's 31 years old, has 51 caps for the national team with 6 goals since 2013, and he plays for Santos in Brazil since 2024 and has played in Ecuador and Mexico and even in Saudi Arabia has Romelu Otero. He's been part of the just about half of the tournaments in the 2016 edition and the 2021 edition. He was selected, but not for the 2015 and 2019 editions. It seems like I won't get into it. Anyway, he was off the team when he returned in June 2023. Off the team for more than a year there and just started 1 of their remaining 10 games, but he did sub in for 5 and was on the bench for 2. So Romelu Otero we consider a possible candidate, perhaps even likely, given how much he's been selected recently, but always a bit on the fringes of the squad despite his 51 caps. Okay, let's finish with the summary of the central attacking midfield position. You might guess by the lack of definite or likely candidates that they don't use the position much. In fact, only twice did they use it over the recent period. And neither of these players started the first one. It was forward Solomon Rondon playing it once, and Romelu Otero here did start one. He got his only start in this position, and that was in the last game in March 2024. Okay, we move on to the forward position. We don't have any players coded as secondary strikers, so just players coded as forwards. And let's talk about the position before we introduce the players. It is a single player about 75% of the time. So if you envision that 4-3-3, we regard that as a single forward with a left and right attacking midfielder. They'd have used a 4-2-2 about a third of the time, so that one is 2 players up front, and a couple of other formations they've experimented with have had 2 players. So about a quarter of the time they've used probably more than a quarter of the time, a third of the time, let's say, 2-player position. Let's go to the candidates then. Solomon Rondon is a definite candidate here. And likely candidate Sergio Cordova, and possible candidate Matthias Lacava, and somewhat surprisingly, Joseph Martinez, just a possible but unlikely candidate here, and two other possible but unlikely, John de Cadiz and Eric Ramirez. We're not going to look closely at all of these players, but we'll select a couple of them. Ernesto Torregrosa is seemingly off the squad, and we have 5 players either seemingly off the squad or retired. The second one is Adalberto Penaranda. We'll put him in the retired section. I will briefly go over these players. The other one we introduced in part 1 is Fernando Aristeguieta, and he will also put in the retired section. Alejandro Marquez, seemingly off the squad, and Giancarlo Hurtado, definitely retired. I don't even know why we have him on the list. Let's go back to let's deal with some of these candidates here. So Joseph Martinez, I do want to talk about, a real veteran for the team and had some great success as a player. He's 31 years old and has 66 caps and 14 goals. Been with Venezuela since 2011. He's with CF Montreal in Canada now since 2024, but was particularly successful with Atlanta United in the USA for the 5 years that he was with them. He's also played in Switzerland and was part of part of all of the tournaments. Usually not as a starter, but real veteran. But only started 3 of their 12 games at the beginning of this period, and not selected for the last 4 matches. So there is a possibility of him being selected, but I'm quite surprised he's being used so little because he's a fairly big name for them. The other possible but unlikely is John de Cadiz. He was selected on the bench for the Copa America 2021, but hasn't been really used by the squad much. Eric Ramirez, we won't talk about. In fact, I'll just pick out a couple of the other players. We talked about Fernandez Aristeguieta in the section 1 there. So, yeah, I think that's all I want to say. I'll just repeat the names and then we'll see if any of them show up. So Joseph Martinez, John de Cadiz, and Eric Ramirez, possible but unlikely candidates, and then either seemingly off the squad or retired. Ernesto Torregrosa, Adalberto Penaranda, Fernando Aristeguieta, Alejandro Marquez, and Giancarlo Hurtado, who was part of the Copa America in 2021 as a substitute, but hasn't appeared since 2021. So that's all of that long list of players dealt with. And we'll go back to the definite candidate, Salomon Rondon, 34 years old with 104 caps and 41 goals. So very famous player for them since 2008. Has returned back to North America to play for Pachuco in Mexico. Actually was with River Plate in Argentina for a short time before that, but mostly has played all over the world for Everton and Newcastle in England, for Zenit St. Petersburg in Russia, and for Dalian Professional in China. Like a really well-traveled player is Salomon Rondon. We won't go into too much detail. Basically, he's been a starter in all tournaments since the 2011 Copa America. However, not in the 2021 Copa America. He was selected for the preliminary squad and surprisingly didn't make the final cut there. He hadn't been playing for the team that much during that period, but has recently. He started 11 of their 12 games since the start of 2023 and subbed in for the other one. So back to playing consistently with the team. I think for the 2021 Copa America, he hadn't played much due to kind of club being busier with his club, but now seems to be more focused on the national team. So Solomon Rondon, a definite candidate. Possible candidate Sergio Cordova is 27 years old and plays for, 27 years old and has 19 caps for the national team since 2017. He plays for Alanyaspor in Turkey since 2023, but is currently on loan to Sochi in Russia. And he has also played in Canada and in Germany, so also a well-traveled player, Sergio Cordova. He was not selected for the 2019 Copa America, just on the preliminary squad. No, not even on the 40-man preliminary squad there, despite having been with the team since 2017. So his first tournament was the Copa America in 2021, where he was a substitute. But he was off the team for a year before he returned in the recent period in September of 2023 and just started one of their remaining 7 games. He was subbed in for 2 of them, though, and on the bench for the 4 others. So recently called up regularly, but not likely to see him much as a starter. Sergio Cordova, then, a likely candidate. Our last player we'll look at here is the possible candidate Matthias Lacava, and he got his first cap in March 2023, and actually that was his first and only appearance on the bench. So actually, I must have thought that was March 2024 when I put him as a possible candidate, but if it was more than a year ago, then we would say he is seemingly off the squad. So not a candidate, just another one of the pile of players discarded here. So we really only have Solomon Rondon and Cordova. I'm going to move Matthias Lacava down here to seemingly off the squad. And let's talk about the position. So as I say, usually a 1-man position and about a third of the time a 2-man. It's almost always Rondon. And when he's partnered with someone, it was Joseph Martinez at the beginning of the period. In the second half of the period, though, it was a different player every time. Mostly ones we've met, actually, including Cordova one time. We see, I believe, Matches was there one time, and Savarino. Which actually leads us into the next section, because I'm going to talk about that. So Solomon Rondon looking like the starter here, and we finish then our look at the players, our look at the candidates, and we move on to section 3 and any closing thoughts. So I've kind of hinted at it along the way, that even the players who look like potential starters have often only started half of the games. And then when they're replaced with someone, it's not a consistent replacement. It's often players just tried out for one game. Often players who are just in the position for one game. So it's actually quite confusing. This is under the new manager. If you'll recall, they had 2 very experienced managers, but the recent manager from the start of this period is someone who was called up from the assistant manager position without a lot of experience. And he seems quite undecided on things. We did see more consistency in the World Cup qualifying games, so we can maybe guess who the starters are going to be from there. But particularly in the backup positions, there seems to be a lot of indecision. Anyway, we won't go too deeply into that. We'll move on to our next order of business, a review of the starters, and I'm just going to pause here to set that up. All right, we're back to try to identify starters. So we'll say Fernando Batista, the manager, will be a starter, and leave it at that. For the goalkeeper, I'll say Rafael Romo. Looks like likely to be the starter, but Gratterol has made a bit of a challenge, and Romo has only started 8 of the 12 games over the period, so we can't put him in green as a definite candidate, but on our graphic here, we'll highlight him in blue as the likely starter. For central defenders, we have Jordan Osorio, and he looks like he'll be a starter. I'm just going to go back to my notes here and make sure I'm saying the right thing. So, yeah, we do see Osorio and Wilker on Hell as starters here, and Christian Macoun and recently Ferrarese as the backups for this position. But there are only 4, and we usually look for 5 or 6 central defenders being brought. So we wouldn't be surprised to see some new candidates or some of the old candidates brought back here. But that position has been, has been a bit more stable than some of the others. Here we get to where I talk about in the closing thoughts. Miguel Navarro does seem the definite starter over here, but has only started 8 of the 12 games. And the possible candidate, veteran Roberto Rosales, has never replaced him in the 4 games he's missed. It's been central defenders, and then often just players in the game for one position. So that's very much true here. But we would say that Miguel Navarro is the definite starter there. Same on the right side, even slightly more definitely, Alexander Gonzalez. But still only started 9 of the 12 games there. In the defensive midfield, it looks like we'll call it a rotation among Jose Andre Martinez and Thomas Rincon, the captain, and Yangel Herrera. Again, none of them starting enough for us to be sure. And a lot of players coming in and out of the position, especially in the friendlies. But these do look like the kind of the main candidates here. So that, again, Jose Andre Martinez, Thomas Rincon, Yangel Herrera. Up we go to the left attacking position, and Jefferson Salcedo, again, looks like the most likely candidate here, but has only started 6 of their games, half of their games, so we can't really nominate him as a starter. We do have Darwin Matches and Sosa also kind of rotating into the position. So we can't be sure enough beyond saying that Jefferson Salcedo is the most likely. But with only half the starters, I'm not going to highlight him as a starter. On the other side, it's even more uncertain. We have Jefferson Savarino as the most likely candidate, but he too has only started half of the game. And here too we see just players replacing him for 1 game and then leaving, and so we have no idea who the backup for this position is either. Central attacking, they don't use that position much, so none of the candidates there look like starters. But if we go to the forward line, we have one of our most clearly defined starters in Solomon Rondon, who has started 11 of their 12 games over this period. So we can be confident highlighting him in green. Okay, that brings us to the end of the review of starters. So let's take a look at injuries for the team, and it's a good outlook for. Sorry, I'm finding my spot here. It's a good outlook for Venezuela this time after the debacle of COVID in 2021. Where they had several players basically unavailable even after the first game. Here they have no injury concerns. So hopefully it'll remain that way up until the final. We won't get any idea from the warm-up games because they won't have any warm-up games. So we'll just have to see in the final. But I can look at the sources I use and see if any players are tagged as injuries. All right, that brings us to the end. And we'll finish just by previewing part 2, which we will do when the final squads are released. And at that time, we'll look at any notable non-selections and any surprise inclusions. I'm expecting some surprises for Venezuela, particularly in the form of maybe some unexpected players being brought back. We do expect a couple of new players. Most teams have them, but Venezuela doesn't have as much of a pool to draw from as a lot of the other countries. So we think it'll be more players being brought back. Anyway, we will get to that when we get to part 2, and we hope you join us for that. We would like to thank Paul Udin and Pixabay for the wonderful background music accompanying this mediacast. The piece is called Victory Epic Music.